Hello there everyone, welcome back. We are diving right into the next series of matches, and this time around apparently we're going to be face off against, the Tau Protector fleet. This is one matchup I'm kind of interested in going up against since they've been buffed quite a notable amount, with their Manta Bombers doing an additional 30 points of damage per hangar bay, on top of the railguns, ion cannons, and of course the seeker missiles all being the seeker missiles weren't really buffed, but the railguns certainly were, so when you compound that with how impactful the seeker missiles could be in general, this might be a difficult time for me there in general, but otherwise, I don't really remember too much of the nuances here, aside for the fact that my opponent is not going with the 6 cruiser type of fleet. That's going to be a little bit of what I'm kind of expecting, or at least making preparations for, trying to deal with the heavy amount of seeker missiles, and of course, the main strategy there, as made apparent by the fact that everything's already embraced for impact stance, is I'm going to be trying my best to make the most out of the gas clouds and asteroid belts. However, I was also contemplating maybe going with the polarized field again to try and use those asteroid belts to help secure fission a little bit, but my half the map is incredibly sparse for at least utilizing such a strategy, so I am kind of forced to rely on more aggressive movement play, and of course I am seeing right now that it's not quite the 6 cruiser fleet. Hell, I'm kind of contemplating that there's like a custodian of some sort in there, since I do see that there's a war spear. I'm assuming it's a war spear anyway, since I can't prioritize the components on it, but it's always possible it could be a frigate that was deliberately not left with silent running stance to kind of throw people off, or at least throw me off. In this case, I'm kind of aware that's a crew war spear. I almost am doing double takes thinking that maybe it was 2 war spears, since I was almost certain maybe I could not prioritize components on 2 of the ships there, but at the end of the day, I'll let you know what the ship is, or at least what the fleet composition is. The 4 that we see is actually, yeah, you can even see right there, I'm double checking to see if I'm actually playing off against the Protector fleet, or even just a merchant fleet. That would make a little more sense to have maybe 3 battleships as opposed to like a custodian and a couple of cruisers, since it seems like an awkward count. But what we're actually up against is a Demiurge stronghold, which is kind of odd since it wasn't deployed over on the right where the asteroid belts are, and you can even see the fighter bays there. A single protector, war spear. Well, actually, I think it may actually be 2 protectors. There are no other auxiliaries outside the crew war spear and the stronghold. But at the same time, I got my 3 objectives, so I can kind of play a very passive game, at least currently. Try and keep my ships moving in preparation, and also make good use of this gas cloud, which will be short-lived a little bit once these fighters get in here, but once they're destroyed and with the help of my brace for impact and the fighters, I should be able to conceal myself relatively quickly without worrying so much about seeker missiles. Unless there's some frigates nearby. I don't recall hearing any boosters from a mission dissipator, so I am somewhat comfortable knowing I can get myself concealed, but there's always that possibility with a scanner pulse kind of making things awkward. And there's the silhouette of the Protector right there, no less, so I kind of already knew there was a Protector. We saw 2 fighter bays after all. At least 2 Barracuda squadrons as opposed to the 4 or 6. And then otherwise, it's just playing the waiting game since I do have 3 objectives, and this gives me the convenience of setting up my ideal positioning. Trying to kill off as many of the fighters as possible, since after all, we only saw 2 carrier ships. So ideally, I want to thin that out as much as possible with really no risk to me. At least that way, it makes it easier for my point defense and my fighters to just shoot down seeker missiles, and I don't have to worry about this damn dance where I have to avoid them all like constantly as I'm engaging Tau. And Eldari are probably one of the best equipped type of factions to easily dodge the seeker missiles, at least initially. Once they start getting spread out, and once they start coming in like staggered because I'm dodging them so well, it becomes a lot more difficult a lot more quickly. And here we're seeing 2 Protector squadrons, and there's the reveal of at least 2 emissary sauces, I believe. Considering if they were, well, it's possible they could be Borkons, which I believe are the seeker missile variant of the light cruisers, but conveniently, boosting out there, disengaging allowed me to dodge an experimental railgun. And that is really hard to do, so I will admit that was a lucky break, dodging the 300 points of damage from that. but we have a lot of health to get through. With the Crude War Spear being immune to critical hit damage on top of its sheer health and A3 armor, and a Stronghold which thankfully is not charged with its Kite Beam, it's still a bit of a wall to get through. But thankfully the Stronghold's incredibly wide ship, so I'm going to have some convenience here with torpedoes, but my priority is destroying the flagship if I'm able to. It's a bit of an awkward positioning though, it goes without saying, since the War Spear is boosting forward. I did get a permanent engine critical hit on the flagship, but in this position I have no real way to at least safely kind of dive in there and kill with torpedoes despite my attempts to shoot a salvo off. I think that was more with the War Spear if I would be perfectly honest, but that torpedo salvo strikes true. That's actually going to cause a mutiny right now with the fire assaults on top. But with there was an engine damage on that one cruiser, but thankfully I was able to repair it really damn quickly. And now this is where the torpedoes shine. I told you about how wide the torpedo, or the prow is on the ship. Imagine how easy it is to just murder this thing with torpedoes, despite this really awkward position we're in. Thankfully, without the charge of the kiting laser, I'm kind of relatively safe to finish this thing off, since it does have a little more bravery than that of the War Spear. And no fire results to it due to like the repair results, so it's not like I can force this thing to break as well. So I'm just gonna kill off right now. Do a little bit of inconvenient ramming damage with my one cruiser, but very minor, and considering we knocked out potentially 2 of their ships and the flagship almost completely gone, this is looking like a very simple match for what I was worried might be very damn dangerous. And with the losing a lot of my crew and actually I think the deck was permanently destroyed and only temporary damage on the engine, so I'm not out of the woods yet. I just gotta get the repairs up. And apparently my opponent was prioritizing the deck, which is kind of odd, since they don't really have anything to do rapid amount of morale damage to me in a hurry, kind of like a Kulex's Assassin or a Psychic Scream of the Tyranids. It'd kind of be a little bit tricky to utilize that against me, if I were to be perfectly honest. Unless I'm already just about to die in general just from sheer amounts of damage, because you can see right now, I wasn't using any morale or encouraging speech or rally, and I have more morale currently than I do actual health, which kind of goes a little bit to what I'm saying due to the additional bravery that Eldari have in general, or at least the Corsairs and the Asuryani do. But with their flagship gone and one final protector to deal with, this is pretty much over. I already said that already. It's a bit of an awkward fleet, but with the limited amount of fighters, I kind of dealt with the secret missiles when they did shoot them really damn well. Straightforward match, not much to say here. It's, if nothing else, preparation for when we have to face off against the 6th Protector fleet and their buffed up railguns. Gonna be a lot more problematic, and this player did get the 4-star rank, which I think, well, is my current rank right now, I believe. So it's not like they've been doing a bad job. Okay, second match of the episode, we're face off against Imperial Navy this time, another player I don't really recognize. It's going to be another kind of weird mixed up type of fleet, it goes without saying, so I am not quite sure what to expect otherwise, since again, a lower ranked, or well, an opponent I'm not really aware of, so I'm kind of being open-minded that it's going to be a much more simpler type of match as well, to a vague extent, especially since they don't have like the ranking kind of being displayed to show that they played in at least previous seasons up to this point. But the one main dilemma I'm going to be having in preparation for this battle is the idea of increasing my bravery for my fleet. The Shrine to Asuryani, I am contemplating how likely it is I'm going to be going up against the Kulex's Assassin to try and negate the morale damage. Since I am limited on useful upgrades for my fleet due to my dependence on pulsars as opposed to the lascans, so this is where I'm going to be spending a little bit of time before I ready up on if I stick with that upgrade or not. I do believe I don't stick with this. I believe I don't stick with the Shrine of Asuryani mainly because due to the fact that Imperial Navy do not have Disruption Overcharge, it's almost impossible for them to actually get lightning strikes on me to take advantage of that. Keep in mind, there are ways that for Imperial Navy to still get lightning strikes on me without destroying my generator, mainly due to me using my Wraithbone Shift or Falls Maneuver. Make a note throughout this match to kind of see what I'm referring to, since every time I do my maneuvers, there will be very brief periods where my holofield does die down, and the reason this is important is due to the fact that, and here's seeing the entire army now, 2 Novacans, 2 Gothics, and the Grand Cruiser there. So, like I said, a bit of a weird fleet, but as I was hinting at already, when I do my Wraithbone shift or boosters, my holofield will die down, and that's important because if I can keep a full holofield charge, it basically treats my ships as having their shields charged up or active, or at least online, which basically means I cannot be lightning striked or hindered by anything that requires my shields being down, at least for comparison's sake. So that's something you may want to at least watch as this battle plays out, because it's a very tight timing you would have to utilize if you want to take advantage of the Kulex's assassin, or even just getting regular lightning strikes on me, since I only got 12 crew for each phase of my troops, or was it? At least the crew of my ship, so all you would need to do is 12 crew damage to potentially destroy or at least damage an engine or generator to make it a lot more easier to hit my ships, or at least force a repair out of me. That's kind of the main benefit. And right off the bat, easy dodge of the Novacans. That's kind of why I'm going to have to hang on to my Wraithbone shift at every opportunity. Although with false maneuver and only 2 Novacans, it's not like it's a terrible thing when I burn that early. But I'm watching their fleet. I see the Grand Cruiser up front, and even more so, I see him just standing there waiting for me. This gives me a nice little positional advantage. If they're not going to pressure me, I basically could choose the engagement I wish. And hell, they're even facing their prow off to me, so I'm not really taking a lot of damage in general. Even with the Gothics and their lances, which have the perfect accuracy, they still will do a fair amount of damage over time if they can keep hitting me with said lances. As we're pretty much going to see in the next match, as I'm going to be face off against Adeptus Mechanicus next. But Stasis Bomb is primed, it's going to lock down everything here, it even locks down the Grand Cruiser, almost in the perfect position for these torpedoes to also hit. But this is another example why launching torpedoes in the prow is a terrible idea. I only hit with like 2 torpedoes, despite the fact we're shooting at a Grand Cruiser, probably one of the larger type of ships in the game after all. And it did absolutely nothing for me, even with their deck down as a bonus. But nonetheless, this thing's completely isolated. The rest of the fleet's kind of just sitting there at the moment with the stasis bomb kind of locking them down. So, easy pickings. Not really much to say about this match, I think, overall. Just aside for talking about the convenience that if you're not putting pressure on me due to the fact that all my weapons are focused on the prow, even with the las cans, you do have really convenient means to chase me down if you are aggressive enough. Since even with, I kind of need to turn my side to you if I want to shoot you with the las cans, with the 270-degree stance, that is. And that's assuming I'm going with the lock-on stance on top of that. But Supercharged Void Shield doesn't do much here, and we get a convenient engine destruction as well. And this primes a nice devastating pulsar follow-up, and all the fire results are just icing on the cake here, since this apocalypse is all but dead right at this point. I don't even need to do any further damage anyway. Although, I don't know where the hell that torpedo salvo came from. It just magically appeared and magically missed, something that was so easy to hit. So I'm pretty certain that was a misclick of some kind. I swear that was a misclick. I just honestly cannot remember where that torpedo salvo came from, since everything else was spectacular on that ship otherwise. And unfortunately I do get a Novacan hit, but that was due to Wraithbone shift kind of just not being up in time, is what I do believe. And otherwise, with 2 ships down, having like 3 points to my name, well actually I had 2 objectives I believe, outside the convenience of grabbing that one as I was flying by on the apocalypse, so I'm in phenomenal shape right now. They lost their big brute, they lost the Grand Cruiser, well, they lost their 2 biggest ships in their fleet after all, so there's not much else to say. And torpedoes, just like with my torpedoes, can be easily dodged, so long as I'm not letting them hit my side. That would be the main rule there. Just gotta be cautious of melted torpedoes and not preemptively burning my emergency repairs, in case that could cost me later with an inconvenient engine damage result or generator hit. But another stasis bomb, this is an incredible weapon for at least just the pulsars in general. Since I have no projectile speed to them, hell, even the las cans can benefit incredibly well with this as well. Since they're not really able to dodge those shots anyway, it just takes a little bit longer. And a little bit inconvenience there with the pulsar fire, I gotta say, since I missed out on an opportunity to lightning strike the one ship there, let alone the broadside boarding, which I was trying to focus on the cripple one, it goes without saying, so there is a weird inconsistency that I'm gonna have to figure out. Since I also can't remember if I prioritized them separately. I am using the lock-on target with that said. Hell, I may even prioritize the battleship and the Grand Cruiser. It happened so quickly I honestly can't remember if that's what I did, but that with the lock-on should help alleviate that scatter fire, since that is one of the biggest constraints that the Eldari can have with pulsars, since it can ruin your momentum quickly if you're just hitting shield damage on multiple other ships, as opposed to getting the critical hits. And I think they just relegate this poor thing to dying. It mutinied, its deck is permanently gone, and they only got like a Mars left over to kind of fight me off, which in fact probably just used up its last Novacan shot, so I'm kind of free to engage its prow, even with negate damage with the 83 armor. And what I'm going to do here, since I do have that convenience at this point, is just do the false maneuver into a broadside torpedo salvo. Since as we already seen, the Grand Cruiser shooting its prow is not really the best idea, so I'm just going to do the next best thing. It's incredibly risky to try and do this maneuver, unless you're absolutely certain you can get the kill, and are far enough away from the rest of the fleet to not get punished by such a maneuver. In all honesty, just the false maneuver there and hanging on to the Wraithbone shift might be safer if you're confident your opponent's just not going to ram you to death, which they probably could have done there. Otherwise, I don't know what's left here. I think it's just a frigate that we're waiting for, or at least trying to hunt down. Since the other ship's mutinied with his decks destroyed, so there's not much left to that. And then otherwise, like I said, very simple type of match. In fact, it's not a frigate at all, it's two of these Endeavors, I believe is what they are. Endeavors or Endurance, I can't remember which one. I think both of them have torpedoes, just different broadside loadouts. So, with time to clean up the mess here, these things will be easy enough to kill. It's just going to be tricky to hit them with torpedoes when they're boosting out of the stasis bomb though. And I do have a Maelstrom available. I would just need to kill the engines to kind of prime that to maximize my damage. Which I'm not actually getting even after that salvo. I have lock-on stance available. They did hit the generator and the deck, but not the engines that I kind of wanted there. Hell, I don't even think I prioritized components, which is probably part of my problem there. Due to them being silent running throughout all this time. But with the deck destroyed and the mutiny there, this match is over. Another simple match. Not really much else to say there, but it does talk a little bit about the mechanics and the possible weaknesses that the Asuryani, at least the Corsairs and the Asuryani have, since there are opportunities to do lightning strikes, especially with the Culexus Assassin, but my opponent did not utilize said upgrade, so I kind of am okay with my decision there. Okay, this is the Adeptus Mechanicus match I was talking about earlier that we were going to see, and this is going to be a little bit different since my opponent is going to be going all battleships, so this presents a little bit of different problems for me, mainly due to the fact that my fleet composition relies so much on killing or at least crippling ships really damn early to kind of throw them out of the fight, or at least have them not be able to pursue me. But when you factor that with perhaps some of the most durable ships in the game, on top of the fact that I have 800 shields that I'm going to have a hard time getting through, it's going to be a bit of a different story there if I don't get the critical hits that I want. And a lot of the same concept and ideas as before. Do I go with the Culexus Assassin? I think it was a bit of a mistake for me not to go with the Culexus Assassin this match, or not the Culexus Assassin, but the Shrine. But I think that's a mistake, like I said, since Disruption Overcharge makes it a lot more easier for my opponent to actually be able to get those lightning strikes off on me. They just need a single lance hit to deny me my 100% charge, so that gives them easy follow-up to at least boarding me and starting to cripple down the morale of my ships. And immediately I could tell this is basically like 3 battleships with 5 swords, which is going to be a little bit awkward for me trying to conceal myself, since the Adeptus Mechanicus have really good accuracy, never mind the fact they have a lot of lances, never mind the fact that there's a bit of a glitch or bug where I can't actually see their lances shooting at me, so if I'm not looking at my hull field or my health bar, I will have no real idea that I'm actually getting shot at, which is a bit of an inconvenience. But, like I said, I feel like not having the Shrine of Asuryani to help mitigate the morale damage was a bit of a mistake, but at least in this match, my opponent is not actually utilizing the Kulex's assassin, so I'm a little bit thankful after the fact, since they would have gave me no real benefit otherwise, outside maybe losing the flagship for the morale damage it would cause. But right off the bat, my deployment zone, my half the map, is a really bad position for me to play passively. I have no gas clouds, I have a few asteroid belts, but out in the middle of nowhere, or really damn restricted or constrained. Or at least a very small asteroid belt, so I can't necessarily get the concealment I want, and I'm trying to pay attention. I saw the one lance shot there, but I think later on they're actually invisible for the most part. I remember way back when I did a previous, or at least one of my first Asuryani videos after like the previous patch, that I made a specific comment how I was not seeing the lances and lost basically a sort of my health of one of my cruisers before realizing what was happening. So it is a little bit awkward, but at the same time, there's armor piercing rounds, which a bit of an odd choice. It's additional damage, of course, but with the hull field, I actually have better durability than say shooting at a Necron or Space Marine fleet with their 83 armor. The armor piercing rounds would technically give them about double damage roughly with our macro cans, where I have maybe around 75% armor if you factor in how much more durable or how much longevity the hull field would technically give me against the hull field. Or not the hull fields, but the macro cans. I'm all sorts of mixed up today. It's early in the morning, what can I say for me? But nonetheless, I have 3 objectives, but I don't have the convenience to play a passive game. Like with the Tau Protector Fleet, this is going to be a very drastic difference, since I don't have the convenience with 5 frigates to just use the gas cloud forward there when I'm well in their range, and as you can see I'm taking a notable amount of damage already from their lances already. And the more it goes down, the more lance damage I'm going to take. It's like 75% chance to absorb the lance shots early on, but that changes drastically as we dodge these Nova Cannon shots as it goes down, since right now the one ship that was being hit but thankfully recharging was going to take maybe blocks 35% roughly, if not 40%. So sadly I do not have a disruption bomb. This would be amazing for this type of engagement, so the best I could do is try and focus down and cripple one of these things as quickly as possible. And they still have high energy turns, so it makes it a little bit tricky to try and hit with the torpedoes, and I did do a Wraith Bone shift, so this is going to be hard felt with my hull field being shut down, and potentially the hull field will be permanently shut down for the rest of this battle. Did get a couple of good torpedo hits in here, but not something I can really capitalize on the best, I feel like, since this other battleship's just going to intercept and get in the way. And actually I'm getting no critical hits as well, despite all those hits too. They may have just been repaired, but with the Maelstrom spent, the Wraithbone shift about to be utilized to kind of dodge, get out of this rad storm, and I'm hoping to maybe kill off some of the crew of this other ship here, since even though the Mechanicus have like probably the weakest crew complement of a lot of their ships, they still got 3 battleships, which is still going to be a hard nut to crack a little bit, and my firepower is getting spread a little bit as a result of this. So I'm hoping to get one final torpedo salvo in, killing off this battleship, here's hoping, and then at least that way it'll allow me a little more opportunity to maybe get behind these battleships and give me an opportunity to disengage and probably just get behind the battleships, since recharging my hull field is really damn important at this point. Since as you can see, with 2 of my ships kind of completely lost their hull field, they're really vulnerable to lances and just weaponry fire in general. And I was kind of hoping to avoid this ram using a false maneuver, but since there is that slight pause, it makes it a little bit awkward. And I kind of messed up with my torpedo salvos, thinking the front 2 actually had torpedo charge available to them, which bites me in the ass immensely, since that could have caused a mutiny, that could have caused a deck damage result. And my positioning is starting to get a little bit bad, because there's the mutiny right now, the deck's just destroyed at this point, which I could have took good advantage of that, especially with temporary damage on the other deck. if that flagship can be potentially destroyed, I could win right here if the mutiny were to stick, but they get the repair on the other deck on the second battleship before I can do the damage necessary, sadly. And right now, with the flagship gone, I am starting to get these mutiny results, which is a little inconvenient because I could have actually benefited from the shrine just because of that, since I think the flagship would have helped mitigate that before it technically got destroyed. I'm not exactly sure how the morale penalty applies, if it's before or after like upgrades or certain buffs that would make you immune to morale damage, kind of like the Wog Song of the Orcs, for example, where I think they're completely immune if they're under that effect to the flagship's destruction, if it's an active while it's happening. And while I'm really saddened by this loss, this is technically going to be a loss. I try what I can to maybe force a mutiny out of this flagship, or not the flagship, but the second battleship. But with its deck currently up, I don't really have any real way to win this out. And hell, even the frigates could probably just ram me to death for a victory. So, tiny few little bit of misplays and just spraying out the damage, and like I said already, have an inconvenient deployment on my half to allow me to just play passively and stay behind my 3 objectives. Since I mentioned before in my Imperial Navy match how getting the positional advantage is key, I didn't really have that at all, especially with 5 frigates that could constantly reveal me if I went to their gas cloud on their half the map. So it was a brutal loss. Alright, so now we're finally going to have the matchup I'm eagerly looking forward to. Don't get me wrong, face-off against Tyranids is still going to be a very precarious and dangerous matchup, but we're also face-off against Saracen again, and there's going to be a lot of commentary too, in regards to my last video, or at least the last match I had with him if nothing else. But it goes without saying, I talked about before at the start of this attempt for Season 3 that I'm very limited in my visions, and there's going to be a couple of little nuances I'm going to be trying to utilize. As most important factor is utilizing the beacon to try and at least deny them their gas clouds, and at least put it in a centralized area so that they're forced to kind of circle around it or at least hang behind it. It's easier said than done. It's not really going to be probably as effective as I like to think it will be, but I also have some fighters to help provide a little bit of limited vision. And of course, in this matchup, I'm going to be able to hear Saracen's rushes, so I am going to get some audio cues on what they're utilizing. Although I don't hear any tracking sensors being activated, although it's entirely possible that may have been corrected or fixed in the patch and I have no idea about it. But in this matchup at least, I do hear the rushes being spent, so that will also play a factor with me, at least with me predicting where they're at. And also, surprisingly, I'm going to point out we're not going to be face-off against a power asset type of fleet, but the same rules are technically still going to apply. There's going to be a lot of nuances. Well, I am again limited on my upgrade choices. It's just a question if I want polarized field to try and utilize the ability to conceal myself, and of course accuracy penalty in case I face off against power asset. That's going to be the important factor, since anytime I'm flying through an asteroid belt that's minus 20 to accuracy, which if nothing else just negates the tracking sense's accuracy bonus, and then otherwise I have to deal with just orc-like accuracy, which is pretty poor, especially at farther ranges. Maybe it's not a big deal in close, but I'm ideally going to try and keep them at arm's length as much as possible. So minimizing that accuracy with the limited time in an asteroid belt is useful. Although Saracen gets, for some reason, Saracen's incredibly greedy because he gets all the gas clouds in asteroid belt and I only get 2 that I ideally, realistically, can only use as like a fallback point as opposed to just something I can use to kind of engage with. But I do launch the beacon over at the 3rd point that Saracen is going to want to try and grab, and I make notes of how quickly that objective is being grabbed, so at the very least there should be a hive ship over there, if not the battle cruisers at most, with the speed it was captured, or at least the majority of the fleet, so I use that as a tell for a good portion of the fleet, or at least, like I said, a hive ship being over there. So I play around that fact, and what I'm going to be doing with my carrier ship a little bit is launching the fighters and then immediately recalling them once they reach their destination. I call this kind of technique a boomeranging a little bit, since they provide vision for where they're currently going, and when I recall them, they're going to fly directly towards the flagship and ideally a different direction if I utilize it properly. And this beacon does provide me a little bit of security since it's almost impossible with the audible cues to the rushes that I'm going to get flanked on the left. It's mostly on the right side I'm a little bit hesitant of, at least until I hear more rushes, to kind of signify that there's at least a large portion of ships over on the left side. And hell, the frigates are going to give off the exact same kind of audio cue as the cruisers, so realistically I should expect there to be multiple frigates on the left when I start hearing the large clusters of them. And here I am again launching the fighters for this boomerang maneuver I talked about. I'm side strafing a little bit so I get vision on its current path, and when I recall them, I'll get a little more vision on the path I'm hoping it goes through. But it goes without saying, it's very dangerous to even try and do any aggressive plays. But I can kind of rest easy for now, since I have the beacon deny them at least safely grabbing a third point with their battle cruisers at least, and I get a lucky spot on the flagship as well. I would imagine it's luck based, but that's also at the same time kind of what I want to use the fighters for as well. Just ringing it back, giving me a little bit more vision, because that blue circle you're seeing is where it would detect any invisible concealed units. So it does have a very notable difference or vision radius, especially where you consider where I launched it. That almost completely covers that little radius there. I'm still blind on the right side, but it does give me a good vision arc if I utilize it properly. And again, ideally, I want to recall them and have them dock by the time the cooldown is back up, so that way I can immediately launch them out again, which this time I'm launching them directly on the right, to help provide a little bit more vision. Although we still get a little bit of weird overlay there where I launched the fighters previously, so I do not pay attention to that, but doing this commentary and you probably watching this video is probably going to throw things off a tiny bit, be a little bit confusing. So now I have a little bit of more comfort. I am going to launch another beacon, which sadly there is a bit of a window where Saracen can grab the objective. Since with me launching the beacon so early, there is an opportunity where I can launch the beacon again before the first one expires, and that would greatly minimize the window Saracen has to grab the objective without me spying him at least. But thankfully I'm not going to get punished by that maneuver. Thankfully, maybe. I wasn't paying attention to when the beacon expired, to be fair, so maybe it's not as bad as I'm making it sound. But otherwise, I am trying to push into somehow grabbing this objective. We see a drone. I didn't really pay attention to what it's equipped with, mind you, but somehow, luckily I grabbed everything. Saracen was going to try and grab that third point, and the beacon does give me this tell. It gives me that comfort to at least know the majority of the fleet is there. I have absolutely no clue where the flagship is, but with the one rush I just heard, there is a vague sense that it's somewhere behind or at least near the fleet. I'm assuming it was the flagship anyway, since I'm not seeing any other, at least ships that are revealed boosting or rushing at the moment. And with that said, you hear the drones going up now. I never did check to see what they're equipped with, in all honesty. Apparently they're strangled tentacles, so I was kind of going into this thinking they were Krakens a little bit, at least briefly until I actually looked at their health, which will be later on when I get an opportunity to shoot at the drones. Since when I see all these massive claws otherwise, it kind of suggests well, it goes without saying, I gotta be very careful about how aggressive I'm being. With the convenience of Tyranids having double rushes, they can get in my face exceptionally well, and thankfully the gas cloud conveniently, it wasn't really planned this way, helps catch Saracen a little bit flat-footed on my aggressive play. Probably didn't expect it to come in as well, well, it goes without saying, I don't think Saracen expected me to suddenly turn. That wasn't really planned though, but it gave me a bit of free damage. And while the Maelstrom's going to be very limited on damage, the idea is to kind of try and force them to rush. Ideally, in this case, either towards me where I can easily punish that one ship, or now they're kind of forced to burn a second rush if they want this to evade my wrath. And apparently it is making Saracen a little bit hesitant to try and rush towards me too, since I don't know if he actually burns double rush yet, but thankfully I do have Wraithbone Shift. I've kind of been withheld holding that, and it will easily negate the second rush, and with them having no power asset, I do have that convenience to Oh, I hit the stand again, stupid me. I don't know what to do with my hands, for crying out loud, not actually playing this match. It's a little bit jarring, something I'm gonna have to get used to, but the one battle cruiser took a heavy amount of damage. Maelstrom did a respectable amount of damage after that rush attempt, but not something I can really capitalize just yet. Again, since I don't really have a disruption bomb, I'm relying more on the beacon to help at least enable my attack runs. But I at least get one kill, and then it goes without saying I'm getting the hell out of here. And even with these gas clouds, I do have the third beacon. I have 200 point lead, and I have no idea where the flagship is just yet. Since sniping that in the current state of the game, where they have no synaptic link for all those other battlecruisers, if I can snipe that, if I can kill it, then everything else is prone to having mutinies really damn quickly with their minus 75 bravery. They're taking almost double the morale damage when I would hit them otherwise. I just have to deal with the flagship somehow if I could ever catch it, which, while I'm not really pursuing it, I'm mostly just trying to avoid the ships as opposed to go after the flagship. I'm just conveniently going the same direction as going the flagship's at least with the few times that I spot it at least. But this is kind of the window I was talking about where I tried to hunt down the frigates and I have a good opportunity to kill a couple of them. I'm aware of the spore fields to a vague extent, but Saracen rushes in there with the double rushes. I wasted the bombers, kind of thinking I could kill it off with the bombers while running off, but I used this pulsars to try finish off instead. And it doesn't work out the best in this regard. And now we get to see what was the point of these tentacles, I suppose. To get me trapped into these drones so that way they could slow me down heavily with these spore fields. Thankfully I'm not going to take any damage while in here, but even then it's only what, 5 points of damage while moving, but I kind of underestimate the mobility of these ships quite a bit at the same time. Thankfully Wraithbone Shift does get me out of there relatively quickly, and now I do have an opportunity to kill this flagship. It just hasn't used its rush yet, so I am very, very aware of this, as this might hurt if it were to try and ram me. But the priority at this point is the flagship. I do have a Maelstrom available, and I have bombers at the ready, and thankfully, a Wraithbone Shift was conveniently prepared. Ooh, and a beautiful broadside torpedo for good measure. I think Saracen still has the adrenal glands at the ready, and I was planning on Maelstrom in it, but I lose the deck at an inconvenient time. I was going to Maelstrom the hell of it and then immediately lost the deck, so that's why you're not seeing the Maelstrom, to try and finish it off. So I'm going to have to do this the old-fashioned way, through sheer blunt force, or in this case just scappling it with a bunch of pulsars. Now all that's left is the cleanup, but Saracen already concedes this match, which was looking very tenuous briefly. I'm thankful the flagship was not rammed by the massive claws, since it did burn its Wraithbone Shift trying to get out of the spore fields, which may not have been very noticeable due to the greatly reduced speed, but that is what I tried to do, make it so I could not get rushed, and the flagship could have punished me heavily there.